Okay. How you doing, Justin?
Not too shabby about yourself.
All right, sorry guys. I'm ready
Cool.
whenever now.
All right, awesome.
You guys probably aren't familiar with Colorado, but it took me a normal drive that's 45 minutes. Took 2 hours today. So brutal. They from Boulder, right? It's normally 2 lanes, and they condense them down to 1 for traffic, and it's just the worst.
Whoops.
Yeah, and it's terrible too because I have all these Survivor stuff going on. It's just a disaster. Any crazy news on lineups, Justin?
Mets scratch David Wright.
Okay.
Bautista's not playing again.
Cool. I'm ready. I'll if you want to carry it a little bit up front, Justin, I'll be caught up then.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything too crazy.
Okay.
Hey,
cool, man.
Justin, would you mind tilting your camera down just a little bit? Thank you. All right, you guys know the drill?
Yep.
All right.
You want me to host, Justin?
It doesn't matter. I can do it if you want to get caught up there.
Okay, yeah. I'll try to get caught up. We'll see if I can.
All right. I'm leaving.
Yes. Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Grinders Live. I'm here with my good buddy CSU Ram 88, Peter Jennings. We've reversed roles tonight in a strange twist of fate to just change things up a little bit. So I'm going to do the hosting role tonight a little bit here at the beginning. Pete, what's going on today?
Not much, man. I appreciate you doing that. I actually just got back from Boulder. For any of you guys familiar with Colorado, I was up there doing some stuff. And, of course, I did not plan accordingly with the traffic. Took about twice as long. So I'm getting caught up, but certainly excited. We got a big Friday going on. I know you have still a bunch of entries left. How many do you have left in the Survivor there on DraftKings?
I got 14 through of the 34 that I had the other night. So, and they advanced about 40% of the field, and I got about 40% of my entries through. So down to 160, and we'll be down to 60 after tonight. It's really interesting to see these Survivor tournaments and how DraftKings has this quickly deteriorating pool of players, and then the FanDuel Survivor tournaments that have been seemingly going on forever now. Just an interesting mix of one of them going really fast and then one of them going really slow. I think I'd probably prefer something in the middle of what the two sites did here, but because that FanDuel Survivor tournament is getting endless at this point. But the DraftKings one pretty challenging, and it's eliminating people pretty quickly. But it's interesting to see the different dynamics that go into those. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I still have one remaining team left on the FanDuel, whatever the $25 one. So trying to get through that. Certainly, it's amazing where you finish in 50-50s relative to that field. I mean, I've had cashing nights in 50-50s and been towards the bottom. I actually had a night where I cashed almost all my 50-50s and didn't advance. So it's pretty amazing how strong the fields are in both the Survivors. I was looking through the list a little bit earlier today, the DraftKings, and obviously you have a bunch of entries, and a bunch of other grinders do too. So what's your strategy on a night like tonight where it's 160 down to 60, kind of like 35% or so get through? I think it's certainly interesting.
Yeah, I rolled with totally different lineups the other night, kind of interspersed 6 or 7 pitchers. I think I'm going to use the same pitchers on all my entries tonight and just vary the bats. A lot of good bats out there tonight, and I wasn't really sold on anything more than a handful, 3 or 4 pitchers tonight. So it's more the player pool that's driving my decision tonight, and I think I've locked in on a few pitchers, and that's kind of where I'm going to go with most of them, and then vary the bats because there's a lot of offense that's in a good spot tonight. So I think that's the way I'm going to approach it. Not that it'll end up working. I mean, if my pitchers end up bombing, I'm probably going to lose most of my entries, and if my pitchers end up doing good, I'll probably get most of them through. So that's what I'm banking on, and we'll see if that gets to tomorrow, and then tomorrow we'll be down from 60 to 20, And if I've still got some left, I've got an interesting day tomorrow because I'll actually be at one of my buddy's bachelor parties, and we'll be out golfing tomorrow. So I might get the pleasure of attempting to set a lineup on my smartphone. But got to get through tonight first, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I certainly know. I've been one thing I've been really trying to focus on this summer is the golf game. Certainly not by any stretch any decent yet, but something I've been doing a lot of, and I know all about kind of looking at lineups and doing things on the golf course. Certainly fun, but I know the challenge that it presents as well. So I think it's interesting tonight. You talked about pitching, how you're kind of on some certain guys. I'm not a huge fan of the pitching tonight. I think there's a couple good options, but they're really expensive, and like you talked about, there's some really good bats. I do think there are potentially a couple guys who could present nice value, but it's a tough night overall for me. I think Cueto and Bumgarner are probably the two top options. What are your thoughts on them, and do you think maybe Teheran or someone else is the top option?
No, I'm leaning towards Bumgarner myself. You know, he's at home. He looked really good his last time out. And Cincinnati has some pretty meager stats against left-handed pitching. I believe they're 28th or 26th in the league in weighted on base against left-handed pitching, and they strike out a lot. And that doesn't really surprise me, given a lot of their big bats, Hamilton, Votto, Jay Bruce, are all left-handed. So they get neutralized a little bit against the left-hander. So at home, I'll take Bumgarner as my top guy tonight. I think Cueto's a solid option as well. That game has a total of 6, so I don't think you can go wrong with either pitcher in that matchup. Teheran's had some great stats against the Phillies so far this year. It hasn't been as good recently, so I think he's in their company as well towards the top. But for my money, if I'm going for an ace tonight, Bumgarner's probably going to be the guy I take. On FanDuel, I think you can make an argument for a guy like Teheran and possibly in front of him just because the win is so important and you really don't know how that Cincinnati-San Francisco game is going to shake out. But on other sites where maybe the win doesn't matter as much, I think I'll be rolling Bumgarner as my top pitcher.
Yeah, for sure. I'm on the same page. Bumgarner's been my number one all day, and I certainly think that's gonna stay the same. I do like Cueto, do like Teheran. If you're going to go cheaper, I've seen a lot of people on Jesse Chavez, who I think is a good play. He gets a nice, basically bump in 2 regards, moving to the National League and moving towards, he's just in a good spot. I think he's in overall a good value today. He's cheaper on some sites than others, but I definitely think he's a nice option on multi-position sites or multi-pitcher sites. Do you like anyone? Do you like him, first of all, and do you like anyone else if you had to go cheaper than some of the studs?
Yeah, I think he's okay. The Marlins do hit much better at home, but that's a tough park to hit home runs in, so I'm fine with him. Some people were joking around with me over the weekend because about 2 weeks ago I professed my love for Brandon McCarthy's metrics and all that stuff. The supporting stuff with him it was really solid. He's had a couple poor outings in a row now, so I finally said I think I'm off the Brandon McCarthy train until he faces the Padres in Petco. And when I said that, I didn't know that Brandon McCarthy's next start was going to be against the Padres in Petco. So that's that's teasing me out there tonight. I know he's 1-10 and his ERA is terrible, but the Padres just got no hit by Tim Lincecum. McCarthy's biggest bugaboo this year has been the home run ball. That should be neutralized by that park out there. And his xFIP, I believe, is still 299, even though he's 1-10. So it would take a lot of stones to roll him out there tonight. I didn't write him up in any of my stuff today because I said I was done writing him up just 5 days ago. So even though he's burning people, I think he'll be a popular option against the Padres tonight as a super cheap play. Also, wouldn't be against rolling Trevor Bauer out there in a GPP. Seattle's got a ton of left-handed batters, so that worries me a little bit, but Bauer has a lot of strikeout upside, and if you don't want to take McCarthy, if you've been burned by him too much in the past, I think Bauer is okay as a cheap guy, and I think a lot of people will be on Tyson Ross on the other side of that San Diego-Arizona game. Not a guy I'm super, super high on tonight. I just don't think he's looked that great lately, but I think he's okay. I mean, he's a mid-range pitcher on almost every site. I think on FanDuel he's a pretty good value. So those are kind of the 4 or 5 other guys I'd go with besides the aces.
Yeah, I'm actually on McCarthy a lot. I've been on the same page with you. I've been throwing him out there. I know you've been talking about him, and certainly someone whose peripherals are just through the roof this year. I mean, he's pitching extremely well in that regard, but then his record in ERA is absolutely pitiful. So I don't know. I'm a big believer in peripherals in general, and people kind of normalizing in terms of their normal stats, ERA, wins, losses, all that stuff to those peripherals. And I love Brandon McCarthy tonight against the Padres. You can pretty much throw out any pitcher who's average or above average against the Padres, especially when it's in Petco. So I really like him, and 6,100 on DraftKings. I think he's going to be pretty popular. And I'm with you on Ross too. I was surprised to see. I think Arizona had a team total of 3 earlier today, so I was really surprised about that. I know that has a lot to do with Petco, and they're obviously worse versus righties. So I think Ross is certainly another option, and I think Vegas really likes him as well. So those are kind of the guys I'm looking at. I think pitching's kind of limited, and I think a lot of people are going to be on the same guys. And that punch out, which is full of a lot of sharps at this point, I think we're going to see some high ownership. So that's pretty much pitching for me. I think we're on the same page there. Is there anyone else you want to throw out there, Justin?
No, I think that's it. I mean, I really haven't looked too hard at anybody else. Like I said, I kind of concentrated on a handful of guys tonight, and I think we've hit all 5 or 6 of them. So.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's move to some hitting. There's some interesting options tonight. We'll start at catcher. I think there's a variety of different guys that are really good plays tonight at catcher. I think we have a lot of really good options. Excuse me if I give out someone who's not in the lineup. I'm just kind of catching up on those. But first guy I'm going to mention at catcher is Jonathan Lucroy. I really like him overall tonight. I think he's a really, really good option. The Rockies just can't pitch. None of their starters can, and their bullpen's just absolutely terrible. He's my number 1 catcher. Do you agree on him and then kind of the rest of the position?
Yeah, I would say that he's probably pretty close to on an island by himself, unless you're on FanDuel and you have Victor Martinez available there. Because there's a lot of catchers. A lot of people I think would have been on John Jaso tonight, but he is not in the lineup even against the righty for the A's tonight. So that was kind of a situation where a lot of people probably had to adjust the lineups that they had created. So Norris is catching tonight, and the A's don't have the DH because they're playing the Marlins in Miami. So that's a no-go for you folks that would have been on JSO tonight. So that takes him out of play. And, I really don't think it's that deep. You could go – I mean, Brian McCann's burned so many people all year. He's down in the order tonight. I think he's okay as a GPP play with upside because he's cheap everywhere. Yan Gomes is another guy that I like. The knock on him is that he doesn't hit very high in the order, but he's got some pop. And we talked about the good peripherals of McCarthy. The flip side of that is Chris Young, who has like a 3.30 ERA, and his xFIP is high 5s, I think. So the Indians' bats might make some decent plays tonight, and I think Yan Gomes is a guy. He's got some pop, and he's a reasonably good hitting catcher at a reasonable price tag on most sites. So I can get behind him tonight. And obviously, if you have Carlos Santana available at catcher on the site that you're on, I think he'd make an okay play too. I just don't think it's that deep, behind the guys at the very top. Not a lot of ways to go tonight. Deoner Navarro, again, you and I, when we were on the other night, we mentioned him. With Bautista out of the lineup, he's actually hitting cleanup tonight. So there's probably your highest owned catcher of the night, at least on DraftKings, where he's 3,200. Against the lefty Danks, I think he's pretty much a no-brainer play if you want to go cheaper than a guy like McCann.
Yeah, he's the guy I'm going to have so much ownership of. I mean, I think he's just the clear number 1 option. You factor in price, batting cleanup against the lefty. Toronto in a really good position to score a lot of runs. It's kind of probably going to be a theme for us, I'm sure. We'll both be on some of the same teams like we were last night, and Toronto's certainly a team that's really positioned to do well. Got some interesting value plays, which we'll talk about in a bit as well on that team. But Navarro, I think, what's your guess on ownership in the punch-out tonight? I think it's well over 50%.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably say 50. I don't think it'll be that much higher than 50. 50 is probably good.
Yeah, I guess you're right. With Lucroy being an elite option as well and not that expensive on DK, I guess that makes sense. But 3,200 batting cleanup for that team, I really do like him. Other catchers, you kind of hit on everyone that I'm on as well. I talked about Lucroy a little bit at the beginning there as my top guy overall. I think he's certainly, if you're not going to go Navarro, I think he's the place to pivot. If I had to go value at catcher, I think there's a couple different options. Chris Iannetta, I think, is someone that not many people are going to be on. I believe he's batting 9th, which isn't great, but going up against Vargas, I do like that. It is a little bit tougher to hit a home run in Kansas City, so that is one caveat. But batting ninth, and that park is going to kind of, basically deter people from using him, and he still has a lot of upside with his home run potential versus lefties. So that's kind of where I'm looking at catcher. You have any other thoughts there?
No, that's about it. I mean, if you're totally punting, you can get a guy. You can get plenty of guys down there on the cheap. Kurt Suzuki's batting second for the Twins against Nick Tepesh. That might be a good matchup. I believe that game's in Arlington as well. So depending on his pricing on every site, he's not a guy I've researched the pricing on today, but he's batting second with Danny Santana's. The Twins just placed him on the DL, so they're going to be changing up their lineup a little bit.
Okay, cool. All right, well, let's move to first base. I was burned a little bit by Jose Abreu yesterday. I thought he was going to jack one. Certainly still on him again today, going up against Dickey, who I think he can go yard against. He's probably not my number one first baseman like he was yesterday, but he's right up there. I think Edwin Encarnacion definitely gets the nod as my number one guy, and Brandon Moss is another guy who I really like. What are your thoughts on those three, and then kind of the rest of the position?
Yeah, I'd put Abreu behind those other two guys tonight. I like the spots for both Moss and Encarnacion. I think they'll be two of the higher owned guys tonight. Encarnacion's kind of expensive on DraftKings though. If you want to throw another elite option, a couple more higher priced options into that mix. Kyle Kendrick has terrible splits against left-handed batters. I believe a 390 weighted on base. So the Braves are, for some reason, only starting two lefties tonight. They're not starting La Stella. Dan Douglas playing second base against a right-hander for some reason. Not sure what's going on there, but Freddie Freeman is one of those two lefties, and I think he's an elite play at first base tonight with Kendrick having such extreme splits skewed towards the struggling against the left-handed batters. So Freeman's a guy I'm on a lot. I think Mike Napoli's a guy a lot of people are on. I mean, look, Vidal Nuno is just awful. I can't believe he still has a rotation spot. It must speak volumes to the level of replacements that the Yankees have. If Vidal Nuno, the way he's been getting, I wrote my article today that he's been getting lit this year more than Tommy G at the Playboy Mansion. So. I mean, it's just been terrible. How does he still have a rotation spot?
I don't know. When David Price goes to the Yankees or whoever else they're going to sign or trade for at the trade deadline, he's gone. So capitalize on it while you can.
Yeah, exactly. And again, the Red Sox probably not the best matchup, if you're stacking hitters against them, because the Red Sox are pretty lefty heavy. So I like the righties that they do have tonight. I mean, I think Napoli. Pedroia, Bogarts are fine. Bogarts is batting seventh. That was kind of disappointing to see. But Napoli's the guy, I think, for the Red Sox I'm on at first base with that matchup. I like him a little bit more than Ortiz tonight.
For sure. And I think we're pretty much on the same page there. And then, the couple other guys I'll just throw out there, I think you kind of hit on the guys that I think are worth targeting at first base. I definitely agree on Napoli. I think he's someone who'll be owned, but not as owned as he should. One cheap play that I think is really valuable, especially in cash games, is Joe Mauer. Just a guy who's just consistent, doesn't quite have the upside that the rest of these guys have, but he's going to get on base in a variety of different ways. And there's a big total there for the Twins in Texas there. So I like Mauer. They moved him down to the 3 spots, so maybe he can get some more RBIs or something today. I just think he's a really good value. On DraftKings, he's 4K, which is definitely cheaper than a lot of these guys, so you get some value there. But FanDuel has just been where he's so cheap. I mean, he was 2.2K for a long time. Now he's 2.6K, which is still ridiculously cheap. And I definitely think he's a nice cash game play. Not as much of a fan as him as a tournament play, though, just because of the lack of power.
Yeah, and there's a guy that a lot of people are going to ask about. I don't know if you saw this yet or not, but Carlos Pena is actually batting third for Texas tonight. It's interesting. Carlos Pena is capable of hitting 2 homers. He's capable of going 0 for 4 with 4 Ks. But he's batting third in front of Adrian Beltre against Kevin Correa. You really couldn't ask for a better matchup. He's 2,200 on FanDuel, 2,900 on DraftKings. The problem is that first base is such a loaded position. That's where you get caught. I mean, is it worth it to play a punt at first base when it's a guy that's in a decent spot but has a history of being up and down? I don't know. I haven't decided where I'm going to go with Carlos Pena yet, but he's cheap and he's got a great matchup.
Yeah, I was just like, I know he's mid-price on FanDuel. On DraftKings,
29, I think.
Ooh, baby, that is cheap. Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at him too much. He's a guy that, I remember owning him season long, and he'd bat 200 and hit 40 home runs.
Yep.
So, most nights you're pretty frustrated, but then sometimes he'd really come through for you in a big way. That's a cheap price tag. I mean, it certainly makes stacking the Rangers a lot easier, and they certainly have a nice team total. I don't hate it. I don't, love the play. Certainly, if it was another position, he'd be a league play. At first base, like you said, there's just so many good options. It's hard to kind of punt the position. Real quick, I didn't realize this. I was late today, so my apologies on that again. But did you have your house signing today, Cards?
We put our house that we're selling on the market today. So
okay, cool.
We're getting there. We close on our house in less than a month, on the house that we're purchasing in less than a month now, but ours is officially for sale. So if you know anybody that's looking in the Midwest area, if they're looking for a place to settle down, shoot me a message. I'll give them a virtual tour. I've got the camera here, so I can give you a virtual tour of the place anytime.
Anytime. So there you go. Little extra plug there on Grinders Live, and good luck to you on that. I know you're excited about the new place, and certainly, hopefully, all that gets settled for you quickly here. I know your goal is before football season, and I certainly hope that comes to fruition for you. So, any other first base talk? I definitely think the Pena, analysis is interesting, and certainly someone I'm gonna have to look at a little bit further. But anyone else that you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going cheap, that's where you got to go. If you're not going for anybody I think if you're going below Napoli, you might as well just go down and take your chances. Otherwise, you're paying up for somebody that has a really good shot to give you some good production. So if you don't get the Napolis or the Encarnaciones of the world, then I think that's where you take the chance on Pena.
Someone was asking about Swisher, someone I'm not considering at all. I know Chris Young, but
I love the Indians tonight, but if I was stacking Indians, he'd be the one I'd leave off.
Okay, there you go. All right, well, second base I think is another interesting position. Ricky Weeks just doesn't move in price, so he's going to be popular again. Obviously, hit that leadoff home run yesterday. I think he's a really good option overall. I think Dustin Pedroia is another guy who a lot of people are going to be on. But what are your thoughts on those two, and then kind of the rest of the position?
Yeah, I like Pedroia a lot better, especially on FanDuel where he's cheap. He's a guy who's made his career out of crushing left-handed pitching, and then he has a matchup, the dream matchup of all matchups against Nuno tonight, who really struggles against right-handed batters and is a left-handed pitcher. So the split set up very well for Pedroia. He's pretty easily my favorite second baseman tonight. Ricky Weeks is a guy that, just like Carlos Pena, he can hit a home run or two, or he could go 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. Not that I'm hating on Ricky Weeks tonight. I think he's just fine for that price tag, $3,400 at a thinner position than first base. I think he'll be very popular tonight against the lefty Matzek. So, I think Weeks is a guy if you're going down that range, perfectly fine. Pedroia, though, I think especially for your like the FanDuel Survivor games, he's just a much safer pick in a great matchup. So Pedroia is the top guy. Weeks is a good value guy. As far as other guys, this is not a position that's very deep tonight. I do like Jason Kipnis. Mentioned I like the Indians. Kipnis against a weak right-hander, I think that's a great matchup for him tonight. Don't mind Howie Kendrick against Vargas. I think that sets up pretty well for him. Those are really the 4 or 5 second basemen I'm on tonight. If you're not on Trevor Bauer, he gets wild at times. You could give Robinson Cano a look. But for me, if I'm paying up in that range, I just will gravitate towards Cano or towards Pedroia more. Maybe a little bit of Kipnis because I do like the Indians, and then mix in Ricky Weeks where I'm going cheap. Those are really the only 3 second basemen I have on my rosters tonight.
Yeah, I'm all in on Weeks and Pedroia, to be totally honest. Those are the guys I just constantly am using. Give you one play that's going to be contrarian. That's a guy that I only take versus lefties most of the time. That's Ian Kinsler. His price has risen, which is why he's going to be very contrarian just because of his recent production. So if you want to kind of go off the wall or off the board with second base and use that contrarian strategy of overpaying for a player, I think Kinsler's your guy. You can certainly make that work with some of the good values out there tonight. But I think he's another option. I'm not on him at all for cash games. I would never recommend him versus a righty. But I do think he is a sneaky play, batting leadoff for the Tigers, and the Tigers are hot. Peacock is not, he's nothing special. So that's my only kind of off the board tournament play. Really, no other analysis. You want to move to shortstop and talk a little Troy Tulowitzki?
Sure. They're on the road again now, but his price really hasn't come up a lot. I mean, I think he's in play tonight. I don't think he'll be highly owned at all. So, this could be a night for CSU to make bank if he wants to pony up for Tulowitzki. Is it Loesch that's pitching for Milwaukee tonight?
Yeah, Loesch is pitching, and I haven't rostered Tulo much at all recently, which I know I've gotten all these tweets like, "Oh, surprised to see CSU without Tulowitzki." I know it pains me not to play him, but on the road and with his elevated price, I don't see a reason to pay up for him. If he's facing a lefty in Milwaukee, I might consider it, but I just think he's too expensive. I do think along the same lines as Kinsler, he's a great tournament play because not many people are going to be on him, and his ownership's going to be low, and he still has a ton of upside. But I just haven't been on him. I think that right now the sexy shortstop that I think is going to be really heavily owned again tonight, and that's Jose Reyes. Do you think he's number one, or do you have anyone else kind of up there with him?
Yeah, he's kind of right up there with a few guys. This is his weak side. I believe he's only batting 212 this year from the right side. So, but it is John Danks, and historically he isn't, obviously this bad from the right side, but also facing a pitcher that's very good at holding runners on. So, although I'm a big fan of targeting bats against Danks, and I do like Reyes tonight, he's hitting the ball very well right now. I don't think he's far and away the top guy. I think a lot of people would just plug him in and go. I think you can go with other guys in similar situations with similar price tags. We mentioned Xander Bogaerts earlier. He's only 26 or 2,800, somewhere in that range on FanDuel. So even though he's hitting 7th, I think that'll pull a lot of people off of him tonight, which is fine with me. I mean, he's got that great matchup, so I'll still be using him a good bit. If you want to not take Reyes. And, I'll continue my theme with the Indians. I like Asdrubal Cabrera as well. Their lineup is not out yet, but assuming he's batting second, I think he's a fine option tonight. So those are the three guys, kind of 40 to 4,500 that I like. And if you want to go cheap at the position, I think you can. The Mets have scratched David Wright. He's going to have an MRI over the weekend, so they've shuffled their lineup around, and Ruben Tejada's batting second. He's 2,900 on DraftKings, so I think he makes a fine punt because I'm not in love with the shortstop position tonight. I'm not totally on board with Reyes. I'll have him on some of my punch-out lineups, but not all of them. And there'll be a few entries where I think this is a position that you can just you can punt tonight. But Cabrera, Bogaerts, and then Tejada as a punt, I think, are the other guys I would consider along with Reyes tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you on all that analysis. Jose Reyes is someone I love playing, but a couple things to note here against Danks. Like you said, he's much worse versus left-handed pitching, and it also mitigates some of his value stealing bases. It's much harder to steal bases versus lefties. I actually need to look up how well Danks holds runners on. I'm not sure specifically on that, to be honest, but that is something I'll look up before lineups lock, just because I don't think Reyes is going to be as productive as he would be versus a righty for a variety of reasons. He also has a lot less power. His ISO is significantly lower from the right side. So I think that he's still probably my number one option outside of Tulo, but both those guys are probably not worth the price tag just given how they're not in optimal spots. Totally with you on Asdrubal Cabrera. I really like him. I'd be all in on Bogaerts, to be honest, if he was batting higher in the order. But that lineup spot, I don't know why they're doing that. I guess they're going to continue to leave Holt up there, even versus lefties. But for me, I'd much rather see a lineup where it went Pedroia, Bogaerts, and then Ortiz and Napoli versus batting Holt in the leadoff spot. So it's kind of a bad position overall tonight, like you talked about, and I think it's definitely viable to punt. Tejada, like you said, is in a good spot there, batting second. Don't really take Mets that often, but if you want to punt, I think that's a nice option. Another guy I think is somewhat reasonable to take is Elvis Andrus. Not obviously the best spot for him versus a righty, but he is batting second for a team that has a high team total and he's cheaper on the industry. So he's another guy that I'd consider plugging in today. Any other shortstops you want to talk about, or you want to move to third base?
No, let's get off of there.
All right, yeah. Shortstop's pretty ugly tonight. Third base, Ramos Ramirez, Adrian Beltre. Who's your number one guy? And I guess you can include Miguel Cabrera as number one probably if you're going to play DraftKings. But on strictly a third baseman only, who do you have number one?
If they're the same price, I like Beltre. If Ramirez is cheaper, like he is on FanDuel, I like him. The price would be the tiebreaker for me. But all things equal, like on DraftKings, where Ramirez is $5K and Beltre is $4,900, I'll take Beltre there. Again, good matchup, like you mentioned, high team total for the Rangers tonight. I really think this is a night. We talked about it the other night, and it was a great discussion about in GPPs, do you fade the totally obvious pick? And the other night, if you remember when we talked about that, it was the Tigers against Joe Saunders.
Yeah.
And we talked about, do you play the fade on the Tigers? Well, there was one guy in the FanDuel $200 Survivor that had 3 entries left. And for the last couple rounds, I had noticed that he was running trains. It's not a user that I'm familiar with, but he was running the same team multiple times. And we kind of had some discussion about that on Twitter this morning about the I don't think it's that viable to run a train in a Survivor when you're down to that many people. I think I'd want to split up my entries. I only have one left, so I don't have to worry about that. But anyway, long story short, he didn't use any Tigers bats on the 3 same rosters on the night that they played Joe Saunders, and he finished 28th, 29th, and 30th out of the 30 people that were left because the Tigers went off. J.D. Martinez hit a home run, Victor Martinez hit another home run, and all that
went off. That whole team just went bananas.
Yeah, and all the guys were 50 to 75. Even I think Rajai Davis was 80% owned. So that was the night we talked about. That's not a GPP, but the boomer bust strategy of fading the popular stack. Obviously, the Tigers were hugely popular that night, and they went off. So if you didn't have exposure to them, I believe he was the only one in the field that didn't have any exposure to the Detroit offense. Most people had 3 or 4 Tiger bats. So tonight, I think you have a similar situation because I think a lot of people are going to be all over Milwaukee with the way they're crushing left-handers and the way the Rockies have been pitching. We talk a lot about the "what have you done for me lately" thing. All the Brewers have been hot. Everybody who's taken Brewers lately has been rewarded. I mean, they even knocked Steven Strasburg around the other day. So I think you have a similar situation tonight with the Brewers. I don't think they'll be as popular as the Tigers were the other night because there are other decent options of teams with high totals tonight. But I think we have another case, and the Brewers are going to be hugely popular tonight. I wouldn't fade them for cash games, but I think tonight I might take that stance in a GPP to go a little bit contrarian, because although the Brewers do score a lot of runs, they tend to score in bunches. They have a lot of guys that are dependent upon the home run, and I think that they could possibly get held in check a little bit tonight. Certainly hasn't happened lately, but I think tonight more so than the other night, I would be on board with perhaps fading the popular team, say in a qualifier GPP or something where you're gunning for first place.
Yeah, I think that's definitely viable, and certainly, I think anytime being contrarian in a tournament certainly has its value, just because, like you said, everyone's going to be on, the same guys. In baseball, we've talked about this to death, but there's just too much short-term variance in baseball to assume that the favored team or the team with the highest team total or whatever it is always going to produce. So when a lot of people are going to be thinking one way, definitely a lot of value in zagging when everyone's zigging.
Yeah, and if you're not there, if you don't finish up there anyway in a tournament, if it's a 300-man tournament, there's no real difference if you finish 60th or 300th. So
exactly,
no real reason to play it totally safe.
Yeah, no, there's zero incentive to play it safe when you're looking at tournaments. So
yeah, and I know we discuss it quite a bit, but there's new people coming in every day wondering about tournament strategies. So.
Yeah, no, and certainly it's something that both of us have done. You did it with great success this baseball season, and there's certainly value utilizing that strategy in pretty much anything. We've seen it be very, very, very successful. Obviously, there's certain nights where the chalk just all goes off, and chalk lineups win. But long term, I think, especially in a tournament type game, there's just a lot more value in being contrarian. Would never recommend that for cash games, but it is what it is. Any other third baseman that you want to talk about?
The Orioles just released their lineup for Game 2 of their doubleheader with the Rays, and they've got Manny Machado batting second again. Not a guy I'm recommending across the industry tonight, but he is either 22 or 2300 on FanDuel. So if you want a value play or a cheap tournament play, with a lot of people going to be on Ramirez and Beltre, I think he's okay as a punt. Wouldn't use him at 36 or 37, whatever he is on DraftKings, but at basically minimum price on FanDuel, batting second, I think he'd be worth a look over there.
Okay, cool. Let's move from third base to the outfield. Carlos Gomez did not have the best day. Did kind of salvage the night with a single and a steal. Just funny, when the Rockies put McHenry in, everyone can steal on him just all day. But he's certainly a viable option at the top. I think Braun is another guy who people are going to be on. What are your thoughts kind of on the top outfield spots?
I like Braun a lot, given his history at home and his history against left-handers. Gomez, actually, I was kind of surprised when I looked him up yesterday. He doesn't have the best splits against lefties, even though he's a right-handed hitter. I don't mind it. I mean, I don't mind Gomez, especially 4,500 on DraftKings. I think is a great price for Gomez. But on FanDuel, where they're basically the same price, I would lean towards Braun. And I like Braun too on draft. I just think he's the top overall guy tonight. I know he's expensive on DraftKings, but we've seen him have nights where he just carries teams. He had a 3-homer game, I believe, earlier this year, and I wouldn't put it past him to have a big game like that tonight. So I like him at the top. We've talked about Brandon Moss earlier, so I like him on DraftKings where you can use him at outfield. And I think there's ways you can go tonight to, I recommend Ellsbury a lot. I think a lot of people will be on him tonight against Workman. I'm not as high on him as I usually am. Brandon Workman's actually been fairly good recently, and to the credit, I talked about Nuno during this show. The Red Sox are actually favored in Yankee Stadium tonight. You don't see that a whole lot in that series. So I'm a little cooler on the Yankee bats than I kind of thought I was going to be. Ellsbury is always a decent play for cash games, though, because if he gets on, he can steal. If you want a cheap play, Reed Johnson is leading off for the Marlins tonight. That'd be kind of a price-based punt. And same with Endy Chavez leading off again for the Mariners. Not a guy with a whole lot of upside, but Trevor Bauer does walk a ton of batters. And if Chavez gets on, he can steal you a base. And that's really all you need on DraftKings for him to pay off that $2,600 price tag over there. So I don't mind those two guys on the cheap. I even would have recommended Ethier on the cheap because Carlos Martinez, the pitcher for the Cardinals tonight, really struggles against left-handed batters. Needs to improve in that aspect, but Ethier's not in there tonight. Once again, Scott Van Slyke in there against a righty batting fifth. The Dodgers lineup is actually pretty watered down tonight. It looks like outside of those top three guys, they've got Van Slyke batting fifth, Uribe batting sixth, and A.J. Ellis batting seventh. Now the Cardinals might still have Martinez on a pitch count. Not sure I'd go with him over a guy like Bauer or a guy like McCarthy, but he could be worth a GPP flyer. Seeing that Dodgers lineup. And then obviously, Jose Bautista is not playing for Toronto tonight, so don't roster him. Melky Cabrera, I think, could be a decent play, and I'm going to be totally honest, I do not know who this guy is. The Blue Jays have a right fielder by the name of Brad Glenn that's batting fifth tonight. Do you know anything about him?
I've been looking just a little bit on him. I'm certainly going to roster him on DraftKings where he's 2K. I don't care who he is. If he's in the major leagues, batting fifth for min price on the team with who I think in Vegas thinks he's going to score the most runs, I'm definitely going to have some exposure to him. Haven't found too much on him. Did you? I mean, it sounds like you know literally nothing on him.
Yeah, I did. I just saw their lineup before the show. I saw that Bautista wasn't playing, and I haven't looked him up during the show at all. But that lineup is just very odd. I mean, Glenn hitting fifth, Steve Tolleson hitting sixth, Kawasaki hitting seventh. I mean, the bottom of that lineup literally looks awful, but they still have a high total. I mean, they're playing at home, so I don't know that much about him either. But if he's 2K, and I'm assuming
he had 20-some home runs. He had 26 home runs in 2000. I mean, it looks like he's been in the minors for a while. He's 27 years old now, but just looking at his home run total when he did get in a normal allotment of games, and again, not quite major leagues, and we're talking like 110 to 130. His home run totals for those years were 17, 26, 19, and I believe it's 22. So, guy was
are those AAA years? Do you have something up that shows you?
So he started off. I'll give a little more breakdown. So Well, when he was in single A, he had 17 homers. Looks like he batted 271. And then double A, he hit 19 homers, batting 239. Then double A through triple A, looks like he played two different teams, so these stats are combined. 22 homers on a 261 average, so getting a little bit better. And this year, I think the reason he's getting called up, it looks like he's been kind of bouncing back and forth between triple A and double A in these different teams. He has been batting a little bit higher with average, and recently on this Buffalo team in triple A, this year he's batting 377. With 4 homers in 31 games. So
is that a Pacific Coast League team or an International League team?
I'm not sure. I'm on Baseball Reference. Is there a way to define?
One of the sites that I use says PCL or IL next to it, next to the.
Yeah, IL. It is IL.
Okay. The Pacific Coast League. The reason I asked that, the Pacific Coast League is an extreme hitters league. You know, they talk about some of the parks there, like Colorado Springs. They're just launching pads in the PCL. So if he's got those numbers in the International League, that's much more of a pitcher's league. So that's even more impressive for him to hit for that much average in that league. So, and I'm assuming he's right-handed if they have him in there batting 5th against Danks.
Yep.
You know, why not? He's min price on DraftKings. You can load up the rest of your roster. You can get the 4 and 5 hitters in that Blue Jays lineup, Navarro and our good buddy Brad Glenn, and still load up the rest of your team. Yeah, you really can. I think that's perfectly fine. You know, there's more outfielders. You got the Rangers guys. I think are in good spots. They've got Chu leading off tonight. I think that's where he's more comfortable. So I think he's fine. Mentioned the struggles that Kyle Kendrick has had against left-handed bats. So I think it's a good spot for Jason Hayward tonight for Atlanta. And you know, there's a lot of guys. If you want to get some of those Brewers bats into your lineup that are expensive, guys like Ramirez, guys like Braun, you know, fit some of these punt plays in. I've named 3 or 4 guys, if you include Brad Glenn here, that are under 2.6K or under on DraftKings that you could, you know, reasonably expect to do something tonight. So yes, I'll be editing some lineups to throw Brad Glenn in there tonight, and only in DFS would a guy just be up from the minors and instantly a supreme value play that probably 95% of the people that are watching this show right now didn't even know before, say, 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And the other interesting thing about him, and I've talked about this before, I'm not sure if it was us discussing it, but Glenn is now 27 years old, which is just the prime by far for baseball players. I mean, it's not even close if you look at statistical breakdowns of how players do based on age. 27 is by far the premium age for players, and looks like he might have turned the corner, might have figured some stuff out. Obviously, we're speculating a bunch just looking at some stats. None of us have ever, or either Cardinals or I have either seen him swing a bat or anything, but there is a couple good positive signs. He's really starting to heat up this year, which is why he probably got called up. And at the age of 27, he's probably in the prime of his career. So I know this is a one-day sample size and we're only a one-day game, but I do think he's a pretty viable option there that's cheap. Other outfielders, I agree completely with you on the lefty bats there for the Braves. So I love Hayward. I think he's in a really, really good spot. Obviously, the Milwaukee bats I touched on in the beginning. Agree with you on Chu. Someone I love for cash games. I think he's an elite cash game play today, batting leadoff against Correa, a team with obviously a high team total. And Chu just absolutely murders righties. So I think he's in a really good spot. Some interesting plays that I don't think are going to be popular, and I don't necessarily love them, but they're interesting. Cowgill and Trout for the Angels would be all over them if they're in a different park, but I do still think they're good options versus Vargas tonight, just because Vargas is prone to getting blown up occasionally. So I think the righty outfielders for the Angels are nice plays. And then a couple other sneaky value guys. I think we talked about Glenn for a long time here, but on the other side, I think you can get some nice value on the White Sox bats. They kind of threw out a weird lineup today. Viciedo and De Aza are both down towards the bottom of the lineup. I did like them initially a little bit more, but considering they're batting 7th and 8th, I'm not quite as high on them. So I'm having to pivot a little bit off some of the value guys I was looking at initially. Any value guys, if you had to punt, I know you mentioned like 3 or 4 guys already, but if you're just going to go way bottom tier, outside of Glenn, who's your favorite punt option?
Yeah, I mean, he's playing outfield for the White Sox tonight if you just want to stay on that team. I know he's second base and shortstop eligible on DraftKings, but Lurie Garcia is only 2,700, so he's leading off since they did change up their lineup. I think he's okay, and at a position that I really didn't care for, like shortstop tonight, Lurie Garcia has nice value there, leading off 2,700 at shortstop. I don't really see anything else on the outfield. I mean, outside of guys like Glenn, Andy Chavez, and some of the other guys I mentioned, that's probably where I go if I was punting. And the Indians lineup just came out. For the person that was asking about Nick Swisher earlier, he's batting 8th, so that's more confirmation to leave him off. The rest of the lineup is pretty much exactly what you'd expect. I mean, I mentioned I like Yan Gomes, but he's batting 7th, where he's kind of been for the last little bit. But the middle of that lineup, I mean, I didn't mention Brantley. I think is a solid option at outfield as well. But and Santana batting cleanup. There isn't really a hotter hitter right now outside of maybe Victor Martinez than Carlos Santana. He's just been on a tear, which is good for him after he was hitting about 130 a couple of months into the season. He's all the way up to 225 or something like that right now. So batting cleanup tonight, another guy that we didn't talk a whole lot about, but their lineup wasn't out. So the Indians lineup, if you've been waiting for that, no real surprises, and Swisher batting 8th.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's great analysis there. And Santana has been hot. One other guy in the outfield that I should mention, because he's just smoking hot too, is Martinez for the Tigers. Yeah. I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden he is just absolutely on fire. A guy who's always had potential, but man,
what happened is they got a couple of games against Joe Saunders and Nick Martinez to get down.
Yeah, I guess that'll make it easy for you.
The matchups don't. I mean, it's not like the friendly matchups are ending for them. You mentioned them facing Brad Peacock tonight, so it's still a good matchup. I mean, you might as well roll with those Tigers bats while they're hot.
Yep, I totally agree. Let's do this. Yeah, I'm going to try to pull up a pick 5 here real quick, and then obviously if you guys have questions, feel free to fire them up. I lost my desktop again. If people are watching the show, my mouse is having just severe issues, so just give me a second here to get a couple things up because I was counting on my desktop there. But in terms of the pick 5, we got an interesting one off the bat. Ryan Braun versus Mike Trout. Which way are you leaning?
Yeah, I'll definitely take Braun tonight.
Me too. Next one's Encarnacion versus Cabrera. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll take Encarnacion. I mean, despite that lineup being so bad, their team total is still so high, so Vegas expects the Blue Jays to score some runs. I'll take Edwin Encarnacion. It's really hard to go against Miggy, but I love that park at night. I'm not a fan of John Danks, so I'll take Edwin tonight.
Yeah, I'm definitely taking Edwin too. Just love Toronto, and it's hard picking against the best hitter in baseball, but I'll stay on those lines. This next one I think is pretty easy. Both players I like, but we talked about the warts Reyes has today. Aramis Ramirez versus Reyes. I'm going Aramis all day.
Yep, I would definitely do that tonight.
Okay, Beltre versus Cespedes.
Definitely Beltre for me on that one. Cespedes, not a guy we talked about. Really tough. Cespedes drives a lot of his value from power. He doesn't hit for a high average. That's not good in the pick 5 format. Plus, he's in a tough park tonight to homer. So that one's pretty easy to go with Beltre for me tonight.
Same here. I'm on Beltre. And guys, I would fire this in quickly if you're on. I'm sure Owens is watching right now and might be changing it. Victor Martinez versus McCutchen. I'm going to go Victor as well. Victor there.
Yeah, we agree on all 5 of those.
We agree on all 5, and they're all on the left side. So get in while you can. I assume it will be changed here. In the next couple
We've gone in 5 minutes.
Yeah, but the left side looks pretty nice to me, and I think there's a couple close ones. I think Braun and Trout, although we both agree it's Braun pretty easily. I mean, it's hard to go against Trout, and Miguel Cabrera and Encarnacion's close.
Yeah, I think that's the toughest one.
Yeah, the other 3 I feel pretty confident in. Obviously, there's variance in baseball, but I do like that. Any questions that you've seen, Cards?
I have not. I actually closed the chat because my internet was starting to run pretty slow.
Sure. Let me see if I can pull some up. Again, I normally have the chat running on.
I can probably get it here.
I got it here. CSU, you like your Rockies outfielders today? I do like them a little bit, but man, it's hard to take them with their price relative to where they are when they're at home. I just generally avoid the Rockies in general when they're on the road. So. Not a huge fan of them today, but certainly think they're a nice contrarian stack going up against Loesch. Let's see. It looks like the pick 5 might have already been changed. St. Louis CSU, would you fade Reyes to D. Gordon at the same price in tournaments? What are your thoughts there?
You know, I mentioned that Carlos Martinez struggles against left-handed bats. So in that token, I like D. Gordon. The problem with rostering D. Gordon tonight is it's absolutely lethal to roster somebody that depends on the stolen base against Yadier Molina because he shuts that running game down. For that reason, I'm not on D. Gordon tonight. I do think he can reach base a few times, but especially where you're on DraftKings where you get penalized for caught stealings, I think it's a little too risky tonight, especially at his price.
Totally agree, and that's just great analysis. Do like Gordon against a righty there, and a righty who is prone to getting hit hard by lefties. But the problem is, like you talked about, Gordon has so much of his value. I mean, I think he's still leading the league in steals. I don't know if Billy Hamilton's caught him yet, but he's either 1 or 2. I believe he's 1, and he gets all his value from stealing. And Yadier Molina is literally as hard of a guy to steal off of as anyone in baseball. I mean, it's that they talked about it. They asked all the Major League Baseball players, who would you want on your team if you had, who do you think the most valuable guys in baseball are? And Yadier Molina was number 2 behind Trout, and I think a lot of that has to do with what he does with the pitching, and then what he does to mitigate the opponents running on him. So
yeah, if you're going to roster a Dodger tonight, I mentioned Martinez struggles against lefties, but Gordon neutralized by Yadier Molina back there. Ethier's not in the lineup, so if you're going to roster a Dodger tonight, I think your best option is Adrian Gonzalez if you want to do that.
Perfect. And Ducky wants me to plug the Tournament of Shame, which obviously you guys got to check out.
You got thrown off the air last time when you did that.
Yeah, I was trying to. Yesterday was so brutal. Today I've been gone in Boulder, but just a real funny story, and then we'll go back to that. The power went off in my entire apartment with like 2 minutes left to go on the show. So I lost internet, I lost everything, all before lineups lock. So fortunately, I have a couple things in place. I can get Wi-Fi from my phone and some other stuff. Obviously, I have the laptop, but it was pretty tilting doing the show and having everything set up and then losing the power. So sorry about that. But along those same lines, the Tournament of Shame, definitely check it out. It's great. They do an article on Roto Grinders. I'm not sure, how often does that article run? Do you know?
I think he publishes it the following week after at some point in the middle of the week, and then the Tournament of Shame always runs on Friday nights.
Yep, so definitely check it out. Please post that the link back into the chat. I personally haven't gotten in it yet. I will definitely do that. Probably will, have to do whatever the gimmick is for the shame part of it at some point. So definitely going to be fun to watch that, and certainly some cool things going over there on DraftKings. Real quickly, too, just want to point out a couple things over there on DraftKings today. Got a bigger perfect game than we've had recently. We have a 60K one, which is nice here in the dog days of summer. Still some room on that right now, a little over half full, so it could be some nice value. There's also a satellite to the Atlanta Strip at 5:30, and then there's the standard array of tournaments. Also, obviously, I think this is the last one. Actually, there might be a couple. I think there's 2 more, but there's the World Series of Poker main event satellite. Not sure if that's still available tonight, but if you do want to punch your ticket to the World Series main event where you could have a shot to win over $10 million, you can do that through DraftKings as well. So any last comments there, Cards, or anything you want to recap?
No, I haven't really seen anything out of the ordinary, so definitely, those Blue Jays value bats in the middle of the order I think will be popular tonight. Brewers will be popular, and it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out tonight. So good luck to you, Peter, and good luck everybody out there.
Yeah, thanks, man, and good luck to you, too, as well. I think you probably have the most Survivor teams left right at this point. Have you checked?
I actually have not checked the field yet.
I would be very surprised if there's someone who had more than you. So I hope you continue to do well, and good luck in that tournament. Definitely hoping to. Are you going after the Atlanta? I know you're taking a little bit more time right now, but are you going after the Atlanta SKUs?
I'll probably put a few in there, when we get to July. We got our house on the market now, so next week I might ramp back up a little bit. The Survivors really, that DraftKings Punch-Out is pretty much the only thing I've played all of this week. So next week I'll probably get back into it, grinding away at those and trying to get some seats. And hopefully now that you've got 3, the rest of us will be able to fill in around you there.
That's just super lucky. I hope I can qualify for some of these other.
Give yourself more credit than that. You deserve some credit for that. 3 seats is amazing.
It's certainly it's been lucky, but what I was going to say is I'm very hopeful that you make it out there. Hope to see some of the other grinders out there. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think at this point the Punch-Out's a great opportunity. Last question for you: if you do win, would you take half cash and half the Atlanta seat, or would you go for all the cash?
I'd probably take the cash. You got to get at least 7th place out in Atlantis to get more than that 50K. So I might, I'd take the 50K, and then maybe try budget a little bit of that towards trying to get one. But I'm the type of person that I'll take the sure money in my hands right now. So I'd probably take the 100K.
For sure. Well, I hope either way at some point we get to see you out there, and good luck the rest of the night and all your games, and good luck, grinders.
Good night, everybody.